Hey guys, thanks for joining me. This is the last message that I'm going to do on this. I'm super excited that I got through this. I'm sorry if any of it was jumbled. This is the first time I've done something like this. I had 500 notes in like 4 different notebooks and in my Bible, and so I just really thank you so much for sitting through all of this with me. As a refresher, we are talking about wilderness and quarantine. We have talked about the correlation between the quarantine we're going through right now and Jesus' 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness where he's tempted by the devil. We've talked about being led into the wilderness and not lost here. We've talked about what we're going to face in the wilderness. We've talked about his timing and not ours, his heart and not ours. And today, for the last little bit, I want to talk to you guys about the meaning of the wilderness and that we're not meant to leave here unchanged. And so there's one thing that we can be certain of, right? As Christians especially, we are going to be in the wilderness. We've been there before. We are going to find ourselves there again. We're there right now. And I think that we need to find a way to be okay with this. It's not easy. I can't tell you guys, in the last 2 years alone, I think I have found myself in the wilderness 3 times, not counting what we're going through right now. And each time there's been something that God wants to show me there. There's been some reason that he has isolated me, that he has hidden me from public view, that he has told me that the answers I'm searching for when my friends and my husband are not the right answers, that I'm up, not able to sleep and restless. There is something in each one of those situations that I've needed to walk out of that wilderness with. I want to say the last wilderness I went through, the biggest thing for me was learning how to get in my closet. I generally, I know how to pray. I pray all the time. I pray in the morning. I pray every time I get in my car. I pray when I drop my family off somewhere. I pray all the time, but I am horrible at sitting down and giving dedicated, one-on-one, quiet, no distraction time to God. I used to say, well, I shower. Whenever I get in the shower, I pray. That's my quiet time. My kids don't walk in. My husband doesn't ask me questions. I can shower and pray, and that's good. And it was good. There's nothing wrong with praying that way or praying in the car, doing whatever it is you're doing. But there is something missing if you're not being intentional about sitting aside, putting aside time to sit alone. No phone, no noise, no distraction. Let your family know. And for me, that means I step into my closet, I shut the door, the kids know not to avoid me, I don't take my phone, I bring in my Bible, I bring in a notebook, and I pray. And I pray over specific things, and sometimes while I'm in there, he gives me extra things I need to pray about. I take notes. A lot of the content you guys are getting from me in this message came from that. And so I just want to remind us that it is important to do that, and that was the biggest message I walked away from in my last wilderness. And so in this one, I'm walking away with a lot. This message has given me so much to walk away with, and I hope that it's doing the same for you. But I want to remind us of the main thing of how to walk into our next wilderness, okay, and walk out stronger. And one of the first things is the Bible tells us, and I'm horrible, I didn't write down the reference, but it says to consider it pure joy. All trials, to consider them joy. And that's not easy. I'm not going to touch on all trials because I'm not even there myself, but I do want to touch on the trial of being in the wilderness. And it is okay to find a silver lining in this and find the joy in it. And just in quarantine itself, right? There is so much sadness. There is so much illness. There is so much death going on. And it's tragic and it's horrible. And I can't even begin to touch on the sadness that's attached to that. But it is so important that we look back and we see the good that has come from this. I see people sharing on their social medias, right, that Italy has fish in parts of the water that they haven't seen in forever. LA doesn't have smog. China and the United States, NASA has sent out pictures of the atmosphere and how much of the smog and pollution is gone. And we have families at home getting together. I love walking through Target, and all the board games are sold out and the bikes are sold, and I'm watching families on bike rides together and going on walks together, and we have families together for the first time in a long time, if not the first time ever, because of the busy schedules and requirements of work that are on families nowadays. And so I think we're seeing a lot of good come out of this. I'm writing again, I'm talking, I'm doing this for the first time. There's growth, there's habits being formed, there's new things that we're doing, and we're growing in this. And I think it's so important to look at that. And that's where we find the joy in a trial, right? There is always bad in a trial, but there is always a silver lining. And I want us to focus on that, especially right now. again, another thing we need to remember in not coming out of this unchanged is the way Jesus came out of his wilderness, right? He sat and stood on on God's truth. He sat on the word and stood up to the enemy and stood on that truth. And even in the Bible where we hear it talk about the armor of God, the sword is the word. And he used that to battle the enemy and win that battle. That's why the enemy stopped tempting him, because every time Jesus came back with the truth, Jesus came back with the word of God, and he won that battle. And I think that's so important for us to remember. Know the word, stand on the truth that's in that, and fight your battles with the armor of God. One of the really cool things that I found in all of my studies on this is that the very verse that the devil tempts Jesus with in Psalms 91, remember I mentioned earlier that he misuses it. He takes it out of context, and he tells him that, the angels will protect him if he jumps like that. And I think that's a danger we get into anywhere, right? When we pluck a verse out and we try to use it for something, we get in danger of misusing it. And so I went looking for this verse to see exactly how he misused it. And really, it's just that he took it out of context. But when I looked at it in context, I found what was most interesting to me is that this is probably a verse that all of us should be praying right now as we're going through this quarantine and the fear of everything that's going around. And I just want to read a little bit of it to you guys. But it talks about, for he will rescue you from every trap and protect you from deadly disease. He will cover you with his feathers. He will shelter you with his wings. His faithful promises are your armor and protection. Do not be afraid of the terrors of the night, nor the arrow that flies by the day. Do not dread the disease that stalks in darkness, nor the disaster that strikes at midday. And it goes on and on. But then it goes, after a little while later, it goes back into what the enemy had said. And as it's saying, if you make the Lord your refuge, this is what the enemy left out. If you make the Lord your refuge, if you make the Most High your shelter, no evil will conquer you, no plague will come near your home, for he will order his angels to protect you wherever you go. They will hold you up with their hands so you won't even hurt your foot on a stone. And so he gave him that bottom part, right, that he would protect you. But he left out, if you make the Lord your refuge, if you make the Most High your shelter. And that's the important part. That's what I talked about last week or yesterday, where I said, it's the heart of how we're doing it. If God had jumped off that if Jesus had jumped off that temple, would he have been safe? Because he wasn't doing it with the right heart. When he got on that crucifix, he knew that God was going to resurrect him, because he knew he was doing as he had been called to do, and he knew he was doing it with the right heart. And so I think that's so important. Like, I loved realizing that. And so again, if we know the truth, if we know the word and we want to stand on it, we have to know the word. Jesus may have memorized a little bit and said, oh, it does say that. But he didn't. He knew the word. He knew the requirement to have the angels protect him was to make the Lord his refuge and to make the Most High his shelter. And I just love that the fact, again, that there's these correlations, that the very thing that the enemy used in the wilderness to tempt Jesus is ultimately the same verses that we should be praying over ourselves in this quarantine to protect us from deadly disease, to use his faithful promises as armor and protection, not to be afraid of terrors in the night, all of that, right? So I wanted to just tell you that. And then Sarah Jakes Roberts did a really great podcast sermon on the wilderness, and just a couple things I took away from it that really have resonated with me ever since I heard it, I think back in December. And she says, who you become in the wilderness determines how effective the enemy will be in your life. Strength isn't how you stand up to something, but how you surrender to God. And I love that, because who you become in the wilderness determines how effective the enemy will be in your life is huge. It's how you let God use you, right? It says strength isn't how you stand up to something. It's how you surrender to God. If you're not surrendering to God and you're using your own strength, you're going to fall. But if you surrender to God in this wilderness, he's going to grow you. He's going to change you. And you're going to become somebody that is effective in denying and turning down temptation and the enemy. But if we're not surrendering to God, if we're not knowing and standing on his truth, the enemy is going to grab a foothold. He's going to tempt us. He's going to make us feel isolated. He's going to make us doubt, and he's going to make us act out in unfaithfulness. And I just want us to know that we are not meant to come out of this unchanged. We are meant to come into it because we've been led here. We are meant to follow him and trust on his word here. We are going to face the temptations and trials here. That's just what it is. And we're meant to trust that in this temptation, we have to rely on his word, his timing, his heart, his word. And in all of that, getting alone with God, relying on him for strength, relying on him for answers, we're going to be changed. We're going to grow. We're going to make better decisions. We're going to become better and stronger people. And in that, we're going to be able to help other people. And that's how you get through wilderness. And that's how you come out changed. You don't want to come out of this unchanged. And it's more than just a habit of, knowing how to sew or bake bread or whatever it may be. It's about the spending time with your family, getting in the closet with God, relying on him for strength, praying more, giving praise to him in this for the good things, right? The spending the time with the family and the good things that have come out of this, the healing of our earth. If we can't do that, if we can't look on the bright side, pray to God during this, lean on him for strength, and then come out of this praising him for the good that has come out of it and praising him for the growth that he's brought out in us, then we've not come out unchanged. And you can bet you're going to find yourself in another similar wilderness real soon. And so the last thing I want to give you guys is another verse out of the Bible. I hope, guys, that in some way this has helped you. And this verse is kind of really where I feel like it just speaks so closely to what this is. And in Psalms 66, 8 through 12, it says, "Praise our God, all people. Let the sound of his praise be heard. He has preserved our lives and kept our feet from slipping. For you, God, tested us. You refined us like silver. You brought us into prison and laid burdens on our backs. You let people ride over our heads. We went through fire and water, but you brought us to a place of abundance." So remember, he led us there. He tempted us. He let the devil tempt us, but he brought us to a place of abundance because we leaned on him. And so that's all I have for you guys. I hope you got something from it. I wish I felt like I did this amazing job, but ultimately I did the best I can. I hope you guys loved it. And maybe I'll have more for you guys another day. Have a good one. I hope everyone stays healthy and happy. Bye.